I'm Jim Marshall. I'm the president of the United States Institute of Peace. We apologize for the slight delay. It's Secretary Hagel's fault, and he does have a little oomph. For those of you who don't know, the Institute, putting it very, very simply, stops fights around the world, doing so in partnership with governmental and non-governmental organizations, both domestic and foreign. We work very closely with the State Department, USAID, the Defense Department, with the government of Iraq, and with many, many others in order to prevent, mitigate, and resolve violent conflict. I'd like to go ahead and recognize some of the folks who are here today. Of course, Prime Minister Maliki, thank you for returning to the Institute. We have His Excellency Hushar Zabari, Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Sadan al-Dalimi, Minister of Defense, His Excellency Mr. Fali Al-Fayyad, National Security Advisor, Mr. Yassan al-Najaf, and Mr. Arkan Zibiri, both members of the Council of Representatives. Lukman Al-Faili, Ambassador Lukman Al-Faili, who is the Ambassador to the United States. Hamid Ahmad, who is the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. Ali Mohammed, who is the Chief Media Advisor in the Office of the Prime Minister. Mr. Talib Mishari, Head of the Counter-Terrorism Bureau. Mr. Azadin Haji, Deputy Chief of Mission for the Embassy of Iraq. And Major General Ali Al-Araji, who is the military attaché for the Embassy of Iraq. Also joining us today, one of my favorite people in all of the world, former Secretary of State and the first woman Secretary of State for the United States, Madeleine Albright. I'm listing her as part of the USIP team, which includes Steve Hadley, former National Security Advisor and a member of our board, Ambassador George Moose, who is here with us, also a member of our board, Professor Jeremy Rabkin, and Ms. Judy Ansley, who are also members of our board. Dr. Kristen Lord is with us. She is our Executive Vice President. In addition, I'd like to recognize a couple of special State Department guests. Ambassador Beth Jones, who is the Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs, Ambassador Steve Beecroft, U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, Attorney Brett McGurk, who is Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Iraq and Iran. And now, Manal, if you'd come forward, I'd like to recognize Bill Taylor, Ambassador Bill Taylor, who is our Vice President for Middle East and Africa and leads our efforts where Iraq and in support of Iraq's success. And then Manal Omar, who is a great asset to the Institute, to the United States, and to the world. She's done a terrific amount of work where Iraq is concerned. She's published a book, Barefoot in Iraq. Some of you may have read that book. She is a very important part of the Institute and has been leading for years our efforts where Iraq is concerned. And she's going to describe a little bit about the work of the Institute in Iraq.
Thank you, Congressman Marshall, for such a warm introduction. I would also like to welcome His Excellency Prime Minister Maliki, his accompanying delegation, and our distinguished guests. USIP has been working in Iraq since 2003 and maintained a permanent office in Baghdad since 2004. We have shared its high moments as well as its difficult ones. We worked hard with our partners in government and civil society to overcome the peak of violence in 2006 and 2007. USIP takes great pride in the fact that we have always been in Iraq and maintained an office in Baghdad, even during the most difficult days. USIP's core mission in Iraq is to strengthen local capacities to prevent, manage, and resolve conflicts peacefully. We work with Iraqi partners to develop the tools and the institutions necessary to resolve disputes through nonviolent means. We have been doing so by working with Iraqi facilitators and mediators, supporting justice and security dialogues, working with youth, women, and minorities, as well as working with the media to prevent incitement to violence, and a crucial element of working with religious and tribal leaders and ways of building institutions across Iraq's rich diversity. Our partnerships and relationships with the government of Iraq and civil society has grown stronger over the years. We engage with the executive branch, the Council of Representatives, the judiciary, the regional and local governments, as well as a vast number of civil society organizations. We have many joint success stories to point to, such as the local capacities we've supported, some of them distinguished national and provincial leaders, and others organizations critical to advancing Iraq's transition towards peace and stability. We have mitigated disputes and conflicts across Iraq, including Mahmoudiyya, Diyala, Nineveh, Kirkuk, Diwaniyya, and beyond, while we also put the foundations of civic education, human rights, and religious moderation for the institutions of education. USIP and its partners are proud of the progress that we have made, but we also recognize a lot remains to be done in Iraq. And we see from the unfortunate tragic violence that has still cost many lives, the road ahead will not be easy. Your Excellency, we assure you and the Iraqi people that as Iraq prepares for the 2014 elections and faces countless challenges to a secure, better future for the Iraq people, Iraq can count on the support of the U.S. Institute of Peace as a partner on all levels, starting with the community, to local councils, to any national dialogue. Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask Ambassador Beth Jones to come forward. The format today will be an introduction from, come ahead. The format will be an introduction of the Prime Minister by Ambassador Beth Jones, and then the Prime Minister will speak, and then sit and take questions. And so the audience, I think, already knows this. If you have questions, perhaps you've already written them out. Obviously, we're not going to have time for a great number of questions, but hopefully the Prime Minister will find the questions interesting, hopefully not too provocative. And with that, let me turn it over to Beth Jones.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome. Welcome to the delegation, some of my longtime associates, and especially welcome. It's wonderful to be here with Secretary Albright. It's wonderful to be at USIP, especially for this extraordinary event. I want to thank USIP and commend Jim Marshall on his leadership and all the great work that USIP has been involved with since he took over as president last year, and of course the work that USIP has done for so long in Iraq. Today I'm delighted and honored to introduce His Excellency Noori al-Maliki, Prime Minister of the Republic of Iraq. Prime Minister Maliki is in the midst of managing the daunting challenges Iraq continues to face, while also striving to find solutions that will provide greater opportunity and stability for the Iraqi people. The Prime Minister will meet with President Obama and Vice President Biden tomorrow to further strengthen ties between our two nations. They will discuss how we can help Iraq confront these challenges and discuss ways to enhance cooperation between our two countries under the Strategic Framework Agreement. This is an important time for U.S.-Iraqi relations. Nearly 2 years have passed since U.S. troops left Iraq. We must never forget the thousands of Americans and many more Iraqis who lost their lives in the struggle for a new, free Iraq. Iraq has moved on many issues and its future looks bright. Iraq is blessed with tremendous natural resources and a growing economy. It is set to hold national elections next year. It has dramatically improved relations with its neighbors, particularly Kuwait, and its deepening ties with Jordan and Turkey. As Iraq has worked to reintegrate itself into the region, we have seen 17 Arab countries open embassies in Baghdad, and we hope others will do the same. We also have seen increased opportunity for American business. Major corporations, including Citibank, Ford, Boeing, General Electric, and many others, are now invested in Iraq. In May of this year, the United States and Iraq signed a trade and investment treaty, framework agreement. We are also paving the ground for a future generation of Iraqi leaders. In recent years, thousands of Iraqi students and scholars have come to the United States to research and study in a variety of fields, and every year this number increases significantly. Iraq still faces formidable challenges, however. We share Iraq's deep concern over the increasing number of terrorist attacks that have claimed over 6,000 innocent victims this year, including deplorable, heartbreaking attacks on schools, religious sites, marketplaces, weddings, and funerals. Most of these attacks have been conducted by an al-Qaeda affiliate, formerly known as al-Qaeda in Iraq, This affiliate, now called the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, has a base of operations in Syria. Its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is subject to UN Security Council sanctions and is a specially designated global terrorist under U.S. law. We continue to discuss security with the Iraqi government, although this is only one aspect of our cooperation. Political and economic tools must also be used to drain the recruiting pool of all extremist groups. We therefore welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to holding national parliamentary elections by April 30, 2014. We call on all of the political blocs to finalize the law to govern those elections as soon as possible. The Strategic Framework Agreement gives the United States a unique role in fostering Iraq's democratic development. We will continue to work with the United Nations and Iraqi political leaders to ensure that all technical requirements to ensure free and fair elections are in place. I want to assure you, Mr. Prime Minister, that as Iraq continues its progress and confronts these challenges, it will have a committed partner in the United States. Our relationship is rooted in mutual respect and mutual interests, as enshrined in the Strategic Framework Agreement, our permanent and enduring roadmap. I thank USIP for this opportunity, and I would ask that you please help me welcome Prime Minister Maliki.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the most compassionate and most merciful, may the peace, mercy, and blessing of God be upon you. In the beginning, I want to express my gratitude and esteem to former Congressman Mr. Jim Marshall for his welcoming speech. I also want to express my thanks and gratitude to Ambassador Beth Jones for her warm words. And also, I want to extend to the USIP my greetings and my gratitude for the role the Institute played and is playing in Iraq and other parts of the world in order to face the terrorist challenges and the disbalances that we are facing at this point because of the development, the mechanisms, and the new techniques used by terrorists to undermine interests and institution in all countries worldwide. So once again, we are here in your strategic, important institute, and I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here, and I want to stress the bilateral relation that link the United States with Iraq. These relations are enhanced because we cooperated, we were partners, and we shed blood together whilst fighting terror. And this allowed us to win over terrorists in Iraq. We give blood together. American soldiers, Iraqi soldiers died, and all of the people of Iraq also was victim of the heinous terrorist attacks led by Al-Qaeda and the remnants of the former regime in Iraq. We were able to start a new round of reconstruction after defeating Al-Qaeda, who at some point stopped development and exploiting our rich resources and stopped the assistance to Iraq. But nonetheless, at some point, life came back to Iraq. Our oil export, our revenues, our budget increased, and the economy started recovering, and reconstruction developed, and the situation improved greatly in Iraq at the security and at the economic level, and also at the political level, despite a disbalance that we witnessed immediately following the fall of the Saddam Hussein regime. But we were able to defeat Al-Qaeda, and this brought life and union back to Iraq. But Why do we see what we are seeing today? Why these daily massacres that Amnesty International has considered as a genocide of Iraq and Iraqis, or against Iraq and Iraqis? Let me also mention that some believe that one component is fighting another component, one of the components of the Iraqi people. This is not true. All of the Iraqi people are targeted. The Sunnis, the Shiites, the Arab, and the Kurds are all killed alike. It's the issue relating to the morale of Al-Qaeda and the terrorists who want to reach their goals by shedding the blood of the Iraqis and spreading terror and undermining the political process. So why is Al-Qaeda back in Iraq after we were able, through national reconciliation, through mobilizing the people, and through the security forces and the serious cooperation between our forces and the United States of America and our common teams? Why is terror back to Iraq? I do believe you understand why, but let me state it again. Why is terrorism back to Iraq and to the region? And what are the main reasons why terrorism is improving in Iraq? It is first a vision of the reality that is being impacted by the whole region after the so-called Arab Spring revolutions that we support because they targeted dictatorships that were repressing the people for 30 or 40 years in a row. So no single regime or leader can remain acceptable whilst governing in such a wrong way for so many years. Hence the revolutions who were necessary to rebuild these countries and the people and the society on sound basis, because they were misgoverned for many, many years. Regretfully, the Arab revolutions were able to shake the dictatorships, but were not able to fill the voids in the right way. So a vacuum was created, and Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations were able to exploit it and to gain ground. They benefited from the fall of the state structure. So now we are seeing the new reality in the region that allowed terrorism to be back because it benefited from the vacuum in different countries. So you know perfectly well what is happening in Libya, in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and other countries that may have to face the same problem that all the previous countries are facing as long as Al-Qaeda is not clearly fought by all countries and societies worldwide. We want an international war, a global war against terror. If we had two world wars, we want the third world war against those who are killing people, killing population, who are calling for bloodshed, for ignorance, and do not want logic to govern our daily lives. This is why we are stating in the USIP that we are calling all countries to hold an international conference on counterterrorism in Iraq. And by counterterrorism, I don't mean fighting terror only in Iraq. The conference will be held in Iraq, but counterterrorism is worldwide. And terrorism is not anymore an Iraqi production, but an international production, and is undermining international security and peace. This is why we want to carry the task, because Iraq is the first country that ever fought terrorism directly and was able to defeat it. But now, regretfully, it is coming back because of the political situation. So we have two parallel tracks, the political track and the regime that are in charge in some countries of the region, and the track of terrorism. If we do not have political regimes based on freedom, on democracy, regimes who listen to the will of the people and ready to go back to the constitution. You know that Iraq at some point did not have a constitution, but a single leader who spoke for the constitution. But now we have a constitution, we have constitutional democratic institutions. We have separation of powers, an independent executive power, an independent legislative power, independent judiciary power, and other independent powers such as the High Commission for Elections, the High Commission for Human Rights, and other commissions as well. So we do not lack democratic institutions in Iraq, but you do know that democratic life and democratic exercise needs maturity, needs learning, needs training. So we have to unroot the legacy of the corrupted regime that used to rule the region. So we need an ongoing training and development. But thank God we were able to have 5 rounds of elections, the last one a few days ago, in order to listen to the will of the people. And this is how local governments and the federal governments were formed, and also the government in the Kurdish province. And the next parliament also will be the result of the elections that will be held in April 2014. And we will not agree on any postponing of the elections. They will be held according to the constitution. Of course, we are facing many problems, but because we are facing terror, and this is costing us money, efforts, and lives. But still, parallel to this, we will building democratic institution, building infrastructure, developing services. Had we not have to face terror, we would have moved forward way more than we did so far in building the developed Iraqi state. Nonetheless, whilst fighting terrorism, we moved forward. And Iraq is one of the main countries in developing, in rebuilding, in exports, and so on. Without terrorism, we would have leaped forward in providing services to our people. But the situation in the whole Middle East gave a new chance for terrorists. Terrorists came back to Iraq when the situation or the conflict started in Syria, and terrorist organizations represented by Al-Qaeda and the Nusra Front found themselves another chance to develop, to be armed, and to benefit from the political conflicts, and the situation started deteriorating in Iraq. So the terrorists found a second chance. We support the Syrian people in what it wants, what it aims for, a democratic, pluralistic regime based on the will of the people. We do not want for the Syrian people to lose any of its freedom, of its democracy in any sort of regime. But we're warning, and we are fearing, and we are worrying of the potential success of the terrorist organizations in Syria. If, God forbids, they win, we and the whole world should do everything to prevent this, to prevent Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations to win in any country, not only in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya, or other country. All of our efforts should aim at preventing the success of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations, because they will have a platform, a safe haven, an environment, and more capabilities, and it will be even harder for us to fix the problems that they will be causing us. So facing terror, ladies and gentlemen, is not only about military force. Of course, military force is important. Security forces are at the forefront of this battle. The quality of the weapons, the plans, the strategies, the developing of the strategies, destroying the cells, all this is necessary but not enough. We need a sound social structure, if there is a division within the social or political structure, this allows for the Al-Qaeda virus to develop. So we are working on containing Al-Qaeda in Iraq by enhancing social peace and reconciliation and finding constitutional solution to our problems. Of course we have problems in Iraq. It's a new democratic regime. It's a nation that is following a dictatorship. It cannot be without problems. And many other democracies, way older than ours, are still facing lots of problems. We have problems, but quite candidly, these problems are under control through the Constitution. It may take lots of time. We may get angry, but eventually we reach a solution that is constitutional and that is adapted to our three powers. And this is what you always see in Iraq. You hear voices, angers, differences, but eventually we reach an agreement. And this is reassuring for us and the world, because internally in Iraq, as we are preparing to fight terror at the military level by preparing our soldiers, preparing plans, getting weapons by intelligence, information, but we also are working on having harmony amongst Iraqis. You may ask, who is killing though? Yes, some of the terrorists that are killing Iraqis came from other countries, but they are also Iraqis locally who are assisting them. I cannot say that amongst the Iraqis, Sunni, Shiites, Kurds, Arabs, none are ignorant and can be supportive of Al-Qaeda and supportive of its ideologies and religious positions. These exist. But we have terrorists coming from abroad and homegrown terrorists, and this is why the situation is deteriorating. But the relation as a whole between the Iraqi people is good. There is no problem between Sunnis and Shiites. The Sunnis are killed today, but the Shiites are killed as well. And who is killing them? In their own region. It is Al-Qaeda who is killing all of the Iraqis. And the ladders they are using to get to their ignorant goals are sectarian banners and propagation of divisions amongst Iraqis. With the will of God, we will remain united, because we defeated Al-Qaeda previously through our union with the support of the tribes and the sons of Iraq. Today, once again, the sons of Iraq are with us. The tribes and the clans are supporting the security forces in Anbar, in Mosul, and all the provinces of Iraq. People, again, are seeing that the situation is deteriorating because Al-Qaeda and its organizations are back, and those supporting it are back. So this is leading to more unity amongst the Iraqis, and we will defeat the terrorists by our local efforts and our partnership with the United States. And we came to Washington to consolidate the partnership and the cooperation in which we moved forward for a long time. At the regional level, we support the idea of the axis of moderation. We have meetings with other countries that also are seeking moderation in the region to face extremism, sectarianism, and violence. We will have other meetings. And in each meeting, more countries are joining because they want to be moderate in facing terror. We want to mobilize our forces to face the many difficult challenges that we are facing. And frankly, we need to say that Al-Qaeda benefited from the international and regional contradictions and from their experiences and expertise that they gained. So they developed their methods, their ideas, their mechanisms, the way they hide, the way they act. This is why we also should find new ways and new means to counter the means that Al-Qaeda is now using in Iraq and in the region. Hence, for us in Iraq, and when I talk about Iraq, It is because Iraq is very close to Syria. You know that the relations between the two countries, the two people, are historic. So when we talk about the American role, it's not only about the American role in Iraq. It starts in Iraq, but it ends anywhere in the region where we can find stronghold of terrorists. So we are creating, building a strategy, a new one based on the latter development or the latest development. We have a new strategy based on mobilizing the security forces and the people, the support of the people, the clans, the tribes, the sons of Iraq, and also enhancing intelligence and expertise. So we are talking with the Americans, and we are telling them that we need to benefit from their experience, from the intelligence information, from training for those who are targeting al-Qaeda in a developed technical scientific way. The Iraqi people is ready to give blood in following the terrorists, but Iraq needs its friends to benefit from experience and training. And also weapons that are necessary specifically for counterterrorism, because counterterrorism has specific needs weapons-wise. It's not about Abrams tanks or long-range missile or artillery or F-16s. It has its specific weaponry. So aside from mobilizing the people and the political forces, enhancing national union, we need also intelligence information that will help us to target the strongholds and the cells and the groups of terrorists. We're not saying that the world should support us. Of course, it should support us because we're part of it. It is our right to seek international support. And if the situation in Iraq is not well treated, it will be disastrous for the whole world, and this applies to Syria as well. But what we are saying is that the international community is responsible as well. Terrorism does not know a single religion or a single confession or a single borders. They carry their rotten ideas everywhere. They carry bad ideas instead of flowers. Al-Qaeda is a dirty wind that wants to spread worldwide, and we want to carry flowers to expand them at the international level to enhance cooperation and peace. So we have a request. I won't say a right, it's a request. It's not only about Iraq, but it's about all the countries in the world that are suffering from terrorism. Terrorism is creating crises. And many wars, many internal crises in the region are proxy crises and proxy wars for regional countries. And the most dangerous of these are the war that are waged under sectarian banners. People are free to choose their religion. No one has the right to interfere in other people's beliefs, and no one can force a belief upon people. But some want to force what they believe on people and to force people to dress in the way they see fit, to eat, to drink, to think in the way they see fit, and according to their own ignorance. This is very dangerous at the cultural level. And this kind of ideology, of mentality, of practice has, regretfully, its own schools, its own institute, fatwas, its own supporters, and hence the problem is increasing. So the problem is huge and increasing, and we should face it. And we have the right to request the whole world which is suffering from terror to support us and support all the countries and the people who are suffering from al-Qaeda and from the terrorists in order to defeat them and allow for people and countries to live in peace. Iraq today, ladies and gentlemen, is witnessing an economic recovery despite everything you hear about terror attacks and threats, but this is not having an impact on companies coming and working in Iraq, on investment, on reconstruction and rebuilding. And we were able to contain the potential disasters that we would have suffered had the security forces not faced al-Qaeda. Today, our suffering in Iraq are due to those people wearing bomb belts and entering cafes or funerals and other gatherings and blowing themselves up. These is what is leading to the huge casualties. Otherwise, they cannot control 1 single inch of the Iraqi terrorists. And with the car bombs, they cannot kill as many people. This is why they are using those ignorant terrorists and criminals who wear belt bombs and explosives and target gatherings, killing as many people as possible. Our plan and our new strategy that we are now still discussing in Iraq is to adopt a new policy, a strategy that, on the one hand, mobilizes the people of Iraq, and on the other hand, uses security forces to target terrorists and arrest them. And also, we need a scientific study on using intelligence, because intelligence is the best prevention against terror, even better than weapons. I don't want to be lengthy. I'll stop here, but let me say that the relations between us and the United States and the cooperation agreement is something we are proud of. And we came here in order to consolidate the strategic framework agreement at all levels. And we are talking about consolidating the strategy. It's not only at the security level and at the counter-terrorism level, despite our very important need at this level, but in education, in economy, in reconstruction, in energy, and every other possible dimension that can enhance the relations between our two countries, consolidate this relation, and bring our opinions closer together, and lead us into a genuine partnership to face the challenges that the Middle East is facing. And because the Middle East is facing it, the world as well is facing it. Again, we shed blood together and we paid the price, and we want to continue our bilateral mutual relations, our cooperation, our partnership, in order to hopefully reach all of the goals we set in the strategic framework agreement signed between both sides. Thank you very much.
I'll take the United States flag.
Oh, gosh, yes. I don't see.
That was a very impressive, very impassioned, very informative, and I think very frank speech, and I thank you for it. I think we all thank you for it.
Shukran.
I have, as I was listening, it just prompted lots of memories. I probably visited as a member of Congress Iraq 15 to 20 times. Can we turn the mic up a little bit? Probably visited Iraq 15 to 20 times during my tenure in Congress. Was on the Armed Services Committee. And earlier, when I was a much younger man, I fought in Vietnam. And I've spent a fair amount of time studying the problems of terrorism and counterterrorism efforts and insurgencies generally. And everything seems to come back to the populace. If the populace in a given area is opposed to the terrorists, opposed to those who would do harm, then they're pretty good at being able to identify where the problem is and then get in touch with the authorities and let the authorities know so that the authorities can go deal with the problem. And as I was listening to your remarks, I was thinking, geez, in Iraq, particularly with assistance from the United States, the armed services are in a position to deal with the terrorists once they know where they are, who they are. You describe the kind of tools that are available. Are you getting in different parts of the country the kind of support that you need from the populace in order to identify the terrorists so that you can attack them? And if not, could you maybe describe why you don't think you're getting the right kind of support from the populace and what could be done about that?
Well, I said that previously we got the support of the people and their direct contribution with the security forces to fight Al-Qaeda. And today, once again, population is supporting the security forces. They are giving us, providing us with information, determining who the terrorists are, and informing us. Al-Qaeda did something that helped us mobilize the people because they targeted all Iraqis, all of them. Now, very, very few Iraqis, such as gangs and militias, have interest in being of Al-Qaeda. But as a whole, the Iraqi people is suffering from Al-Qaeda's organization. And this is giving us a new chance in mobilizing all of the people and sons of Iraq to support the security forces. I'm very, very optimistic because practically at this point, many of our operations against Al-Qaeda and fighting their cells are the results of information and cooperation and intelligence information we have from the Iraqi people, all of the Iraqi people. Because Al-Qaeda targeted all of the Iraqis are now supporting the security forces in defeating Al-Qaeda. And the Iraqis are deferring at this point their other demands because their priorities is to get rid of Al-Qaeda. I'm very optimistic about the position of the Iraqi people. They are fighting Al-Qaeda in very difficult provinces.
Let me go to the questions that have been asked by the audience. To start out with, what do you consider your key achievements as Prime Minister of Iraq for 2 terms now? And where do you think you've had some failures? What did not work well and why?
Well, it's a question that is not very easy to answer quickly. I cannot say that I realized anything. The government had achievements in Iraq. The Iraqi institutions, the parliament, the cooperation between the institutions. So we, all of us, achieved what we achieved because Iraq was about to collapse, as you know. Baghdad was besieged. People were not able to move from Baghdad to the provinces of the west or the north or the south. And in Baghdad, some of the regions were controlled by the terrorists. And there were many talks about dividing Iraq, internal strife, civil war, and we had militias who were abducting people, killing people. We had Al-Qaeda, and there was a huge battle going on, and we had on daily basis 25 car bombs, beheaded people, unknown corpses, destruction of the infrastructure. Everything was about to collapse, and mainly the social structure and the national unity of Iraq. So our main achievement was to reunite the Iraqis and to start again work based on our being Iraqis, not based on our confessional and sectarian allegiances. Some of the people still believe in their confessions, but we are not thinking like Kurds or like Sunnis and Shiites because Iraq comes first. And this is our main achievement. And the second best achievement is defeating Al-Qaeda in Iraq, because Al-Qaeda wanted to transform Iraq into the Islamic State of Iraq, but it failed because we were able to fight it and to mobilize the people to resist, to get stronger. And we would have defeated Al-Qaeda completely had the situation not deteriorated in Syria and in Libya because of the vacuum I mentioned following the fall of the regimes, and Al-Qaeda was able to thrive. Extremism developed, sectarianism developed. So also on our achievement level, our universities are back. Our students who came to the United States by the thousands to specialize came back. We also had the oil contracts that increased our production and moved our budget from 25 billion to 120 billion this year. So these all are achievement. Because when we came to power, Iraq was a complete disaster, war, weapons, destruction everywhere, no kind of reconstruction. But we stopped the deterioration and we stood again on our feet. And Iraq, once again, was able to reintegrate its Arab environment. Arab embassy came back to Iraq. Because under the previous regime and following the fall of the regime, we did not have one single Arab embassy. Iraq was isolated internationally and regionally at the Arab level and was fought because of wrong policies. Now 17 countries have embassies in Iraq, and we have good relations with all Arab countries to the exception of very, very few. And we are working on these relations. We have wonderful relations with neighboring countries, Arab countries, African countries, European, Americans, and so on. So we found our role again, and we adopted a policy of non-interference in other countries' affairs. We are looking for common interests. We do not want to use force against others. We are looking for cooperation between us and countries worldwide. This is the best thing that we achieved. As for the details, once again, we are still suffering from terrorism, lack of infrastructures, school, housing for the poor, despite the fact that we progressed a lot, but to rebuild what's destroyed needs lots of time. And also one thing to mention, in Iraq, we were able to build security forces, army, police, and so on, with weapons that can defend Iraqi sovereignty, and with a military ideology that does not talk about wars and adventures and interferences in other countries' affairs, but about a state that only wants to protect itself and to open up and engage other countries. Our army is an army for our defense, and our security forces are aiming at defending Iraq and its sovereignty, not targeting any country in the region as happened in the previous regime.
Well, as somebody who was a politician at one point in his life, I should have known better than to ask such an open-ended question about achievements. Is there a common vision for governing Iraq shared by the major political blocs? And if the answer is no, what could be done about that?
The answer is yes, definitely yes, to the exception of those who do not want to work in the interests of Iraq and those who have specific agendas. But all the Iraqis say yes, we have a common ground, we have a common vision based on the constitution, the constitutional institutions that we built. But if you want to ask me, why do you have problems? I would say, of course, democracy, as I said previously, needs lots of time, needs solution, and we have a very heavy legacy. Moving from a central, harsh, single-party government based on one single nationality and one single confession into a democracy is not something easy. One democracy, pluralism, equality, national identity, and all this needs time. None of the Iraqis want the return of the single party, the single confession, or needs a country without constitution. The problem is about solutions to the many problems that we face in moving from dictatorship to democracy. This needs time.
Is there at present any coordination between Iraq and Syria on security, especially preventing the flow of fighters and weapons?
No, nothing as cooperation between the Iraqi government and the Syrian government, because we decided to be neutral. We decided not to support the regime, not to support the opposition. We wanted to support the interest of the Syrian people. We do not support the regime or the opposition. We do not want to provide or to equip the opposition or the regime with weapons. What we want is a peaceful solution to a crisis that, if it lasts, will overspill and endanger the region and the world. So any bilateral relations do not exist between the two regimes. But we are trying to talk about solution, and we give our initiative about a solution that we submitted to the Arab League, to Mr. Kofi Annan, Mr. Ibrahimi, and to all friendly countries. But at this point, following all the sufferings, we believe that the world is now convinced that a political solution is the only possible one to the Syrian crisis that is now having repercussions on all.
It's awkwardly written. Do you think the ongoing relations between Iraq and Iran come at the expense of larger or better relations with Arab countries, especially Egypt? This was not my question. This is somebody else's question.
ومن حق الجمهور أن
And the audience has the right to ask any question. And I want to quell the fears of all your audience, respectful audience here and outside. Iraq is seeking friendship. We wanted to adopt a policy of open doors towards all countries in the world. We do not want to have differences with any country in the region, not Iran, not Turkey, not Saudi Arabia, not Syria, not any single country in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, anywhere. This is our policy. So when we have friendly relation with any country, we do understand that it should not be at the expenses of the interest of other countries. But I want to say candidly and frankly, not from an isolationist point of view, I want to say that we need to make sure that the Iraqi interests come first. Each and every single people has its own interests, its own agendas, but our interest is to open up to everyone, to have no differences with any country. If we have differences with one country, we will work on the differences, we will find solutions, and as I said, we are about to hold a new meeting for the moderation countries. We used to have problems with some countries, but we are moving forward into solving these problems, as happened between us and our neighboring Turkey and some countries of the Arab Gulf states. We had problems with Kuwait, the legacy of the former regime, but we worked them out. So our relation with Iran, with any other countries is important, but will never come at the expenses either of Iran or the expense of our friendship with other countries. If you follow on Iraq's foreign policy, you would see that Iraq is acting independently and freely according to its own interest, not according to the interest of any other country. We have a partnership, an agreement with the United States, and this is something some other countries do not like. But as soon as we like it, this is what matters, because we believe it's in our interest to have a strong relation with the United States. If others do not agree, well, it is their problem. They cannot impose anything on Iraqis. If they want our friends to be our friends, our friendship does not impose on us on being enemies of others.
How do you respond to critics? This is not coming from me. It's a question asked by somebody else, of course, who say you are consolidating power around you and that this has adversely affected Iraq's democratic process?
The Constitution is ruling in Iraq. The Constitution gives prerogatives. And this is something I state clearly. Just let me know when I act in an unconstitutional way. But if I act in a way that is not acceptable to some of our partners, this is something else. As long as I'm committed to respecting the Constitution and as long as I use my prerogatives in a constitutional way, there shouldn't be a problem. If I act in an unconstitutional way, please let me know when and how and tell me to go back to the Constitution. But sometimes there are disagreements with some partners, and then they start accusing us But we need to be wise. We need to go back to the Constitution to work out our differences. I never, ever stepped on the Constitution. And one of the American leaders or officials, when talking with some of our partners, told them, this is your Constitution. And you wrote the Constitution, and the Constitution gives these prerogatives to the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And he does not have, for instance, a deputy, and he has open prerogatives, as is the case in the United States. So if you don't like this, change the Constitution. But you cannot ask someone and hold him responsible for something that the Constitution allows.
I'm kind of glad you're the one that's answering these questions, not me. Here's another one. Many Sunni leaders have faced charges for ties to terrorism or the Ba'ath Party. At the same time, many of these same leaders who have faced those charges have been very successful in elections. What does that say or mean for the country that they have this sort of popular support? That's somebody else's question. Glad you're answering it, not me.
وليس لي
Yes, of course. Everyone has the right to be a candidate to the election if it's according to the Constitution. And if they are elected, so be it. Now, some of the former Ba'ath Party leaders are candidates, are being elected, but not all those who were members of the Ba'ath Party still have the mentality and still approve the policies of the Ba'ath Party. In the security forces, we have officers that in the huge majority were officers of the Ba'ath army, because the former regime forced everyone to be part of the Ba'ath party. So if some people are supported by the people and can win according to the Constitution, well, they are welcome. Now, if the Constitution do not allow them to be candidates, they will not be, if their candidacy contravenes with the Constitution. But let me say, at any rate, Iraq used to be a single-party regime, a regime that forced Baasism on everyone. Anyone who was not in the Ba'ath Party was excluded or sometimes targeted and killed. So now, if some of those people are candidates, they can get votes. But none of them was a candidate and stated officially that he was from the Ba'ath Party. We know that the Ba'ath Party cannot. At a certain level, some people that had a certain rank in the Ba'ath Party do not have the right to be candidate according to the Constitution and also to the High Commission, Independent Commission for the election, because it has to approve the candidacy. Otherwise, we have no problem with any candidate.
Could you elaborate on the means used by the Iraqi government and the efforts it will make to ensure that Iraq's Christian minorities have a future in Iraq and are not forced to leave the country or being faced with terrorist threats and blatant discrimination?
Well, terrorism targets every single component, including the Christian minority, because they use a takfiri ideology. But Al-Qaeda used the same ideology of takfir against Muslims, so even more so against Christians. They kill everybody, including Christians, and the Christians are part of our history, of our country. They are good, peaceful citizens. They love their nation. They are committed to supporting it. But Al-Qaeda has another perspective. Al-Qaeda believes they should kill all those who do not think alike. And many of them were victims, but this is the case of all of the Iraqi people. I mean, they targeted churches and they targeted mosques, Sunni and Shiite mosques, and religious places. They killed Christian leaders and Kurd and Arab and other leaders. But because the number of the Christians is limited, it seemed that they were targeted, but we supported them strongly. We protected them. We provided all possible protection to churches, to holy places, to all the Christian political leaders. And when I met the Pope in the Vatican, I asked him to direct a speech for the Christians in Iraq and ask them to remain in Iraq and tell European countries not to encourage Iraqis who are Christians, encourage them to leave Iraq. I told him that we are fighting Al-Qaeda, and I told him I do not want to see a Middle East that is void from Christians or a West that is void from Muslims, because Christian in the East and Muslims in the West are necessary for the cooperation and the coexistence of the two religions. The situation of the Christian at this point is much better. We are supporting them. We respect them. We love them because they are respectable. But I do not deny that they were targeted, as all of the Iraqi people was targeted.
Question. And from the sort of tour de force that we've seen today, particularly your response to the first question, achievements, I think I might know the answer to this already. Have you decided to seek another term as Prime Minister next year? And if so, what are your plans for the election?
Well, until now, I don't know what justifies this question that I've been asked every single day. You candidates, you want a further mandate. This is something that is up to the Iraqi people. They decide, and I do not want to speak for the Iraqi people. Now, of course, it's a very, very, very difficult job. It's harmful and destroys people, but the interest of Iraq come first, and the one that has the decision is the Iraqi people. Even if it's at the expenses of my own nerves, I will act responsibly, as did all of my partners in the previous two governments. But it is up to the will of the people. If they are looking forward for change, I welcome that, and I'm part of it.
Prime Minister, Iraq's success is success for the Middle East, which is success for the world, which is success, of course, for the United States. We want to be as helpful as we possibly can to Iraq so that it can be the success that we know it can be. I want to thank you for coming. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for your willingness to respond to some difficult questions. I want to thank the audience also for your patience to start out with, and for your attendance, and for some good questions. And I think the meeting is adjourned. If you would wait for the official party to leave, we'd appreciate it. Thank you all.